Hello and welcome to the Holographic podcast. I'm your host, Tony Tondi, and I'm joined by my co-host, Kyle, the Salty Dog. Kyle, thanks for joining us today.
Happy to be here, brother. Looking forward to tonight's cast.
All right, let's do it. So last podcast, we did a movie review and a discussion of the movie Fury, which is a World War II movie. And then we started talking about World War II and the fact that we live in a post-World War II era and the consequences of World War II and how it's so prevalent in our lives. And then we discover that this is like a crazy rabbit hole that is so complicated and so complex and so interesting to me.
Cumulative.
So cumulative. Excellent, Kyle. And so we couldn't cover it all in one podcast. We were just like, we couldn't do it. So we're doing part 2, which is really just a continuation of this discussion, but also a discussion about hopefully later in the show, we get to discussing how to move forward. We've talked about moving forward in the show. We talk about solutions because a lot of times people just talk about, they discuss history and they discuss current social issues and past issues, but they don't lay out any solutions. And I think laying out solutions is fairly easy and fairly reasonable. The difficult part is following through. The difficult part is actually having leaders do them. I'm not gonna beat around the bush and say like, oh, the solutions are easy. The solutions are hard. It's laying out these solutions that are easy. And so I want to lay them out. I want to put it out there. I want to talk about them. Let's get them out there so we get the solutions out on the table. And so when then they say, oh, well, I didn't hear any solutions. Yeah, Holographic podcast right here, baby. We talked about solutions. Mm-hmm. So we live in a post-World War II era, and it just permeates everything. It's just, this is our lives. This is our world, not just our lives. I'm sorry, it's just the entire world. The entire world is in a post-World War II era. And that's just the reality of it. So last week, we talked about the technical aspects of World War II and like the scientists and how rockets. Kyle talked about the jet planes and von Braun and the rockets and how that's basically is our space program from the Germans. We talked about the creation of superpowers and the United States and the Soviet Union and how, the superpowers and the powers that be basically carved up the world. And we touched on a few of these things. So let's move on to some more things. I think, and we touched on this briefly last week. We talked about oil and money. I think you said it, you boiled it down, Kyle, to oil and money, right? Ooh, look at that. Oh, there's Kyle. Hey now. So oil and money, the monetary system that we use, and a lot of the countries use the American dollar, and fossil fuels, oil, that's the basis of our world. That's the basis of our economy right now. And that really was solidified by World War II. It wasn't, there was still the United States dollar wasn't as powerful, and there was different monetary systems, and there was even different ways of looking at tech. The pre-World War II, they were still interested in hemp, and they were still interested in alternatives to fossil fuels. And then after World War II, when the superpowers consolidated the entire world, they said, nope, oil and money, baby, oil and the US dollar. And here we are.
Well, I would just also add, I honestly, I don't think it's great right now that we're so dependent on this singular fuel. I think things will eventually fall into line, but let's face it, while the internal combustion engine is, quite a crude mechanism, when you look at it, it's quite a crude mechanism. Quite a crude mechanism. It still does give you a whole lot of bang for your buck. And let's just go back to a quick post, World War II, or even current World War II. So 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, gas and oil, you were getting a lot of energy. Even though it took a whole lot of money to dig it up, it took a whole lot of money to refine it. It took a whole lot of connections across the globe to do all of the connect the dots and actually make it. You still got a lot of bang for your buck. And even now, I mean, partially because we never really developed other technologies, or not with as much fervor. We didn't develop other technologies, but let's face it, baby, gas kicks ass. I mean, gas kicks ass. You know me. I'm a burner, bro. I'm a fucking burner. Okay. I just went down to Essex tonight to look at a motorcycle. A small displacement motorcycle. There's no cheaper thrill than a motorcycle. I can go fucking fast with gas. Okay, so all I'm saying is that even though it's kind of effed up, that was we put all our eggs in one basket. That basket, the eggs were good. and they're just starting to become not so good. You know what I mean?
I would disagree with you slightly. I think that you are correct that petroleum products and oil and gas was a very effective way to grow economies and to move people and to do things and to industrialize. And it was absolutely, and that helped grow our world. Where I kind of disagree with you a little bit is the how there were different alternatives. I think that the oil and gas industry made a specific effort, and this is before World War II, but even then in the 50s, and a specific effort to suppress different technologies to make sure that those eggs were all their eggs were the basket. They had the eggs and they had the basket, and they basically shunned everyone else. That's a different podcast. That's an entirely different rabbit hole. But yes, I can see the point that oil and gas kickstarted the entire world in an industrial sense, and it's definitely, motorcycles are fun. I mean, I think that I think that it, like you said, like it's all, the problem is there was no diversity, whether it was on purpose or not. If you had a few motorcycle fun times, great, but if 7 billion people are using it, it's becoming an issue.
For sure. The only point I'm making is that back then in the 40s and the 50s, when and I'm putting the cart in front of the horse here because we're going to get into this, we carved everything up.
Right.
We're going to get into that. We saw an opportunity to do a real power grab.
Yeah.
A lot of the sourcing for our singular energy, the thing that really made the war machine and all of our other machines, the war machine and all the machines under the war machine go was oil.
Was oil and gas. You're right.
And all of a sudden, the world was our oyster. The world was our oyster. We really had an opportunity. Like, we carved the fucker up, and we just grabbed every bit of crude we could. We planted this and planted that because it was just easy and cheap and free.
Yeah, absolutely. And the world was our oyster, and we're seeing the repercussions immensely today. You have you have the Middle East conflicts and issues, and you have so many, you have all these environmental issues. So yes, so there's a lot of consequences, but you're right. You're absolutely right. The world became our oyster.
And I think also, I'm not making excuses for these bastards, but in the beginning, there really was not much of a concept of environmental degradation. There may have been a few real luminaries. You'd be hard pressed to find them back that far, just post World War II. I think maybe 60s, 70s, it really started to become understood, but buried. But back then, it was just looked at as really good fuel, good energy, and you could do a lot with it. And all of our machines ran on it.
Yeah, and I think you're right, and I think there's a level of convenience too. I think that the point that you bring up, and you're being honest, and if we're honest with each other, like when people are like, oil and gas are horrible, yes, it needs to change, but we're kind of dependent on it, and a lot of our lives are convenient because of it. So we'd be hypocrites to deny the reality of it, almost every single human who lives in the United States has some sort of convenience that I bet that they would not want to give up because of oil and gas. Now, that's not saying the technologies aren't there to change it. And I think that eventually it will change because it has to. But at the same time, you're right. We need to understand and realize this is kind of the bed that we've laid. This is kind of the, this is the world that we've agreed to. It's, we'd be hypocrites to deny that, I guess.
That's so funny.
Just the look on your face, Kyle. I love the look on Kyle's face. So okay. So
sorry, I derailed. Go.
Yes, but no, but that's a huge part. When I said oil and money, I mean, this is it. This is a huge part of our post-World War II era. And this is what is important that we try and move away from. So I just want to put it out there that in that point that you brought up, like, I want to put it out there that I'm not sitting here judging as a right or wrong. When we talk about history and we talk about these things, I'm not saying, oh my God, these horrible people. That's not what I mean at all. It's like,
you're talking about Nazis.
Right. Yes. So Nazis, scumbags, horrible people, they got defeated. And then the decisions that these world leaders had to make. Yes, I'm not a giant fan of the high up world leaders, but the people, I mean, it like you said, it really, it kickstarted it kickstarted economies and really made a lot of people's lives better. And so it's hard. I'm not putting judgment on it, but this is history. I'm just saying what the history and where we are today.
Right. Yes.
Less
and
judgment.
History just unfolds. Yeah.
History
absolutely.
unfolds. Exactly. Yeah. Absolutely. So here we are in this oil and money economy and world. And then a giant part of it was geography, was geographical lines and geographical boundaries and geographical changes. And that has led to so many political, social, and environmental, frankly, issues. And a lot of these geographical lines and boundaries were changed and created post-World War II. So I was actually watching this video about the geography and the countries in Europe change over the last 1,000 years, right? Since like 1000 AD to present. Is really interesting how the countries and everything changes. But from 1950 to present, there's very little change. It changed a lot post World War II, and then there's very little change. Mm-hmm. So we live in this era that's been solidified post World War II, and then there hasn't been a ton of change. Mm-hmm. So we'll talk a little bit about some other consequences of these geographical boundaries and changes. Kyle, did you have a cool?
Did you want me to?
You want to show us?
Yes, I'm going to take you.
So Kyle's a geography guy, for those of you who don't know.
And Kyle's got a really great collection of maps. Can I flip the screen?
I don't know. Technology.
Well, all right. So you know what I'll do actually is I'm just going to. Is it reversey? Is it reversed?
No. It looks normal. Well, as normal as it can, but no, it looks.
Sorry.
Regular.
Just hold on one second.
So Kyle's showing us
So this is a map that I have. It's the northern hemisphere. So it's taken from the pole, the North Pole looking down. Sorry about my shaky hands. So what this does is here's the Indian subcontinent.
Right.
This is Asia. Okay. China. We're going to go over here. Here's here's Arabia.
Right.
This is Africa. Okay. And here's Europe. And I think we're not going to take too much time, but I'm going to zoom in on this as best I can. It's hard for me to do it without.
That's pretty good. Maybe raise it just to go up just a touch. There you go. Yep. There's Europe. Yep.
Okay, so I just want to show you a couple. Well, it's Europe, but also like down here. Is my finger looking?
Yes.
Okay, so this says British Somaliland,
Mm.
and this says Italian Somaliland,
Mm-hmm.
and this says Anglo-Egyptian Sudan,
Mm-hmm.
and this says French Equatorial Africa. This says French West Africa. Okay, and then if we get really close in here, are we good?
Yep, you're good.
Okay, so it's less like nationalities, but we can still see that they draw the lines. We all know what Iraq looks like on a map. This whole quadrant thing
Yep.
is like, we all know this little shape because we've been looking at it for 20 years. That shape doesn't correspond to any, as far as I know, that shape doesn't correspond to any natural lines. It doesn't correspond with any tribal lines. It doesn't correspond with any river lines or anything like that. And the point that Tony and I are trying to make with this map here, again, I apologize because I can't see, is that, and then down here it says Belgian Congo. So you got Belgian,
Yeah.
Anglo-Egyptian, French Equatorial, some Italian, British. These guys just carved it up.
They carved it up.
They just carved it up however they saw fit.
And
you know,
and like, a lot of those lines look like just according to latitude lines, right?
Yeah, they're geometric, like they're straight with weird angles. They have there's very little natural contours to them. They don't follow rivers. They don't follow old ancient tribal pathways or forest pathways or landforms or the differences in topography. They just sort of have these very angular shapes. And that's the way these people, the imperial powers that, decided what was what, decided to cut all these territories up. And
here we are.
And here we are, but what's happened as a result of that?
It is basically insanity. And I think a lot of people don't realize so many of these conflicts. I mean, just one in Iraq, you have the Shias and the Sunnis, right? And that's just as you pointed out, that those geographical lines in Iraq, historically you have the Tigris and the Euphrates, those two rivers in, right. Basically in around that area. And
they went like sort of like
right,
this.
Right. And so, and the different tribes around there was lines according to the tribes. Then you just put them, they made these lines and they put these two tribes together, and that was Iraq. And that created, I mean, do people realize what this has created, what this world is? And what were the two tribes in Africa?
The Hutus and the Tutsis.
And one of them wiped the other one out. There was a genocide happened, and that was horrible, but that was a direct result of these imperial powers interference by us, carving them up with lines and putting these two tribes that were at each other's throats in the same country. And that's what happened.
And let's face it, Tony, I mean, so we're just glazing over this very quickly because neither Tony nor I are real historians. We don't know the very, very details of it, but we are familiar with themes of history and other things. And let's just move forward. Like, let's go to Central America in the 70s and 80s.
Yep.
United States imperialism and United States sort of like, protection of our own hemispherical hegemony, let's say, made us sort of support certain people over the others. And we propped up certain regimes and pushed down others. And we paid very, very little attention to the actual needs of the populace in these places. Exactly the same way that 80 years ago, these us and the European powers did in Africa and the Middle East. I mean, Italian Somaliland French Equatorial Guinea. Like, how dare they? You know, the Belgian Congo. We're not going to spend a whole lot of time, but King Leopold, we all know about him.
Horrible.
I mean, these people just did the worst things ever. For what? They did it for rubber. They did it for oil. They did it for sugar. They did it for all these other things.
Oil, rubber, sugar. For those of you who don't know, by the way, too, King Leopold, just so you're aware, he cut off the hands and arms of like 500,000 people or something like ridiculous like that, and another, you know, multiple millions were murdered. So you don't hear about it necessarily so much in the history books, but it was horrible atrocities in and you know, in Asia you have the Vietnam conflict. That was because of lines drawn post World War II between the USSR, communist USSR, and China and the capitalists. You have Korea, the Korean lines drawn again because of you know, the Korean conflict is complicated. The Vietnam War is complicated, but you have these two sides, the USSR on the communist side and the United States on the capitalist side, going against each other, and it just created this dynamic of conflict. It just created so many political issues.
And we always had we always had what we thought was a good excuse, whether it was going in there for natural resources, whether it was sugar or rubber or oil, or if it wasn't that, like in the Vietnam conflict, it was political ideology. It was the domino theory. We had to stop communism before it got a foothold. So, you know, we went in there and we did that, and we failed utterly because it doesn't work that way. You can't just, you know, you can't, maybe it could have potentially, but like, the point, I think one of the points that Tony and I are trying to make is that what a waste of fucking energy. You
right
know?
Totally,
like what absolutely. A terrible waste of energy. And also, let's face it, like, you know, any sort of righteous indignation that anybody has about terrorists attacking the United States, sure, I think it's awful too. I'm not advocating that anybody is right in attacking us, but let's face it, we have spoiled, we've made people angry everywhere, for, and not us alone, the Euros as well. We've made people angry all over the place through these imperialistic maneuvers, whether it was for political ideology or raw materials. It's no wonder that the chickens have come home to roost. You know absolutely. What I mean? It's
yeah, like, no, you're absolutely right.
Me. You know, I'm not saying it's right. I'm saying I am not shocked in any way that people are pissed off.
You're being realistic. You're being realistic with history. I think a lot of people say, well, you that doesn't matter. No, it does matter. You have to be realistic with history. And the reality is that these superpowers, be it the United States, be it the USSR, China, France, England, Belgium, blah, 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 all these high ups, when they carved up this stuff, when they went in and they did a bunch of nasty stuff, they committed acts of terrorism on those people.
Yes.
And that was wrong. Just like when other people do acts of terrorism on us, it is also wrong. Well, if you look at history, and if you condemn one, you must condemn both. Like you can't just say some terrorism is wrong and others is not. No, our country did terrorism to people also. Wrong. Mm-hmm. This is what we must change. This is what we must change. This is the cycle of history that we have to get out of.
And also, people, like, a lot of people don't really look at the United States as an imperial power. Absolutely empire.
Totally.
100%. Just as bad as any other empire ever in history. The British Empire with their ships, and the Roman Empire with their roads and their legionnaires, and, you know, all of these other places that went in, subjugated, made colonies, took raw materials, you know, put their thumb down on the people. The United States is at the top of the stack. And we have been at the top of the stack for a while.
And continue to be. And if anyone has any question about that, do a quick search about the number and the location of United States military bases in the world.
Yeah.
You will find them everywhere.
Pretty fucking impressive, actually.
It's an impressive empire.
Mm-hmm.
But it at this point it needs to change. It was morally wrong things that were happening, and there are morally wrong things that continue to happen. That's what we want to change. So there's so much. Again, every topic that we're talking about, there's such a rabbit hole there, but we just want to kind of put it out there to make a case for change, right? So we're putting this out to make a case for change. So
what's your next thing? Because if we're gonna transition topics, well, what's your next thing?
One of the toxic things that we had talked about was nationalism, because of what we just said. A lot of this stuff, a lot of these political decisions, and a lot of these horrible acts are not done for the good of anybody. They're just done because of nationalism or propaganda or decisions and things like that.
Well, they're done for the good of us at the great detriment to others.
Right. Well, sometimes they're not even done to the good of us. I mean, sometimes it's not even beneficial for people.
That's true. That's true. That is true.
And that's part of propaganda, is they say, oh, it is good for you, but it might not necessarily be good for us. But
right.
in any case, nationalism can be toxic. Kyle, do you have a something you want to read?
Yes, I do. So, in sort of like, our idea of cramming together themes of, this is terrible and how do we move forward, and let's try and find a solution. One of my great inspirations over the years has been the band Rush. I know that it's sort of a polarizing band with Geddy Lee's high falsetto voice, but the simple truth of the matter is that these guys brought to rock and roll excuse me, something really, really special. Many really special things, but they had a great song in the mid 80s off of the Rush Power Windows album right there. And it was called Territories. And the theme of the song was, it was sort of like a mark against nationalistic tendencies and a look towards a progressive future of cooperative globalism. Okay. So if it's okay, I'd like to take the time. It's not a long song. I'm just going to read the lyrics because it reads like real poetry. The song is called Territories, and it says this: I see the middle kingdom between heaven and earth, like the Chinese call the country of their birth. That's neither here nor there. We all figure that our homes are set above other people than the ones we know and love. In every place with a name, they play the same territorial game, hiding behind the lines, sending up warning signs. The whole wide world, an endless universe, yet we keep looking through the eyeglass in reverse. Don't feed the people, but we feed the machines. We can't really feel what international means. In different circles, we keep holding our ground. In different circles, we keep spinning round and round. We see so many tribes overrun and undermined, while their invaders dream of lands they've left behind. Better people, better food, and better beer. Why move around the world when Eden was so near? The bosses get talking so tough, and if that wasn't evil enough, we get the drunken and the passionate pride of the citizens along for the ride. This is my favorite part. They shoot without shame in the name of a piece of dirt for a change of accent or the color of your shirt. Here it is. Better the pride that resides in a citizen of the world than the pride that divides when a colorful rag is unfurled. I mean, and to hear it set to music is really quite something, because obviously it takes you on this really, really incredible music roller coaster, and it's got its highs and its lows. But really what it's saying is that history has lost itself and become blinded by this sort of me, rah, rah, rah nationalism, my people, fuck your people, when really, there's been a cooperative way to move forward all along. It's just not really human nature. We've proved it over and over and over and over again, and we continue to do so. But it's just nice to hear like some rock and rollers be like, oh, this is ridiculous. There's so much to complain about here. You're being so hypocritical, like, anyway, I love that. Better the pride that resides in a citizen of the world than the pride that divides when a colorful rag is unfurled. Stop waving your nationalism flag. Be proud of where you come from, but not at the expense of others, I think is what the underlying theme is. Anyway, I thought it was appropriate.
I never realized. I mean, I had heard the musical song, but I never paid attention to the lyrics. So thank you for reading that. I think that that's fantastic. I never realized they had created that poetry about reality, the realities of our world.
Yeah, you should hear the
So I'm
fucking
impressed.
guitar riff, dude. The guitar riff is insane.
I'm impressed. So the last line there, I think it's so pertinent to our conversation, and it's so true. I completely 100,000,000% agree with it. Having pride in being a human and with all other humans is the only way to go. Having pride in just your own country or your own state or whatever, and to a point where you're against others,
yeah,
is ridiculous, and it really does go against human nature, I think. And the reason I think that it does is because of propaganda. It's because of information that is put out there by your leaders that tell you that that you are going to be better off if those people stay away or do not receive what you receive. And I'm sorry, but that's historically and factually wrong. That you're going to be better off when the entire human race is better off. That's the reality. We're all better off when everyone is better off.
and yet we keep on looking through the eyeglass in reverse. We still are doing it right now. I mean, it's like I'm no Biden champion, but I gotta say things are a lot more positive today than they were 2 months ago. Simply because,
we don't have this crazy nationalist mentality. It's like we're all in this together.
It's still there, but at least we have a national leader that's not embracing it anymore. So like here we are in 2021, and we're still doing the same crazy territorial bullshit. It's so maddening.
I actually just heard on public radio there was someone who had written a book about segregation and the desegregation of the South. So this is a perfect example of this. In the South, when they desegregated pools and different public places, and they forced people in the South to desegregate and say, no, everybody's got to go. A lot of these public places drained their pools and closed down so they wouldn't have to let African Americans or other people besides white people go in. Then everybody in the community suffered. No one got to go to a pool except for the ultra wealthy, where they said they opened up a bunch of private clubs and the ultra wealthy went, but all the poor whites suffered. None of them then got to go anywhere. And that's exactly what happens is when you are nasty about it and say, well, no, we're going to do these things. So you can't do it. And then it hurts almost everybody except the ultra wealthy. So if you're not ultra wealthy and you think that they care about you, if they don't, I'm sorry, they don't give a shit.
Yeah. It's one of those sort of scenarios where I believe that we might, you got to walk a mile in another person's shoes to really kind of understand, and I haven't walked that mile. I'm not lying. I'm not saying that I am Jewish, so I've been oppressed, I had to deal with some anti-Semitism throughout the years, and that's still a bother. But I'm not oppressed the way real people are oppressed. But at the same time, I came of age and was raised by people who showed me that there was a certain level of empathy that you should show to everybody. I just watched Green Book last night. Phenomenal movie. Not going to go deep into it. It was absolutely excellent, and it just was a very, very vivid example of how even post World War II, by 40, 30, 40 years, we're still just dealing with nonsense, and we're still dealing with it today. I mean, I can't wrap my head around the idea that we still are grappling with these same problems of putting our thumb on other people,
Right.
or as is appropriate to the times, putting our knee on other people's necks.
Right.
Because
Totally.
that's still happening every fucking day.
Still happening, and I believe it is this post World War II era that we live in for all these different reasons, for all this different thing. So we're going to talk about solutions, but right before we talk about solutions, there's one more thing I want to talk about because it's interesting to me, which is intelligence agencies. So
Yes.
because it's spy shit and it's nerdy shit. So let's talk about some nerdy shit. So for those of you that don't know, most intelligence agencies weren't around before World War II. There was a few in different names, but the FBI was around in the United States since I believe late 1800s, early 1900s. But the CIA was not around until after World War II,
They were
because
the OSS, right?
oh yeah.
It grew out of the
It
OSS.
grew out of the OSS, and they didn't do a whole lot. They had very little power, and they didn't do it. It was
Well, they were a wartime agency.
right. They were a wartime agency, and it was about gathering intelligence. And then after World War II, they were like, hey, now let's do some crazy shit. And so the CIA was the American version, the KGB and the GRU was the
They started being like, oh,
Soviet Union version.
information. I'm gonna put it under my hat and keep it there.
And in Israel, the Mossad, and so different countries have these spy agencies. Now the crazy political stuff that these spy agencies have done behind the scenes, we may never know. We frankly may never know the crazy political stuff that these spy agencies have done behind the scenes. But we do know that the information that we have gotten is just insane. I mean, the reality, these documents that they've released about what the CIA and the KGB and the GRU and the Mossad have done is like, it just reads like fiction. Like it's really, really nasty and unusual and crazy. And so I don't want to like go crazy into it, but I do want to bring up the point that two main world leaders actually and world factions are directly because of spy agencies. One in the United States, I don't know if people are aware of this, but George Bush Sr., the original George Bush, the vice president of Reagan and the president, George Bush Sr. was the head of the CIA, and he was a CIA agent. So George Bush Sr. was an active CIA agent during the Kennedy assassination. Some people put him there, some people don't. It was sketchy. Then he was head of the CIA.
Spooks. We call them spooks. CIA. That's what the agents are called.
So this is what George Bush Sr. was, because there was such a he was an expert at misinformation and so he made himself seem kind of like weak and like, oh, I'm a good guy. This dude was a CIA agent. Do you know what CIA agents do and were trained to do? So George Bush Sr. was crazy. And that moved into George Bush Jr. and Dick Cheney. That was all George Bush. That was all George Bush Sr. That was all the CIA controlled this country and still have this control over oil. That was CIA. So many people don't realize that this giant part of American control is CIA, baby. Crazy spy shit. Then on the flip side, in the USSR, Putin was a KGB agent. And then I don't know if he was head of the KGB, but he was a high up. And then that's how he consolidated his power. And these guys are ultra wealthy. I mean, Putin is one of the wealthiest dudes in the world. The Bushes are one of the wealthiest people in the world.
Yeah.
It's from these spy agencies, and people don't realize the effect and the grip that they have on this world, but they do.
Well, I mean, part of it is just because, people don't, it's too much to take in. If you actually do go, we use the word rabbit hole a lot, but if you actually go down that's a real rabbit hole.
Sure is, baby.
And it's freaking, it's crazy. So people don't really want to glom onto that reality because, as we all know, and I'm just as much subject to this as anybody, ignorance is bliss. You know what I mean? I know that when I eat the steak, the Matrix is telling me that it's juicy and delicious.
Yeah.
It's that kind of scenario. You know
I don't
what I
mean? I don't want to remember nothing.
Exactly. Right. I just don't want to. And it's just sort of a continuation. And let's not just stop with political power. Like, I mean, I was just started watching that documentary, Crack. The CIA
Yeah.
was bringing in the crack, the cocaine.
Yeah.
100%. For whatever fucked up reason they thought that this would be a good idea. They were doing it.
It's a fucking
without
fact.
them, no crack problem. They killed our own people.
It's insane, man. That's
absolute power corrupts absolutely. There's never any breach from that rule.
Yeah.
You know?
And that's this post World War II era we live in. That was ramped up and supercharged right after World War II, all these spy agencies. And that's it. So, man, that's a crazy rabbit hole, and I don't want to talk anymore about it because I'm gonna get worked up. Like I get worked up. I'm like
right now.
Right. It pisses you off. I know. It makes you upset because I'm gonna
go like start typing on the internet. Be like,
it's it's really it was a plague. It's a plague on society. It's a plague on our world, and so it upsets me. It does.
We're gonna need an LSD and meth fueled 24-hour fucking podcast to get to the bottom of all this.
Nice. That might get us some more listeners.
I'm just saying, like, all I'm saying is you can't cover this shit in a fucking hour, man.
It's true. All right. So now let's move on to solutions. Solutions is important, and I think there are solutions. It's just the will and the action of following through with them, but there are solutions. And the most basic solution that I see is progress and creating things and change without war, without conflict, because that's the cycle that we've been in, the cycle that we've been in through most of human history. And I won't say all, because there's certainly different periods of history, but the cycle that we've been in the last couple thousand years has been conflict, war, change, conflict, war, change, conflict, war, growth, conflict, war, growth. And that's what happened post World War II. Giant conflict, giant war, growth, change, growth. And so this growth and this change and this, like the oil thing, like we have these conveniences from oil, but that was because of that giant conflict and war. So what we need basically is growth and change and progress, but without a war, just without a bunch of people having to die for it.
You're fucking crazy. That ain't gonna happen.
It's such a simple solution, right? But it's so impossible right now.
No, it shouldn't be, though.
It shouldn't be.
And especially because there's been movements worldwide to push that forward. So it does beg the question, because honestly, like, excuse me, I'm going to take a Bernie tack here. It's been proven again and again, year after year, decade after decade, century after century, that the people actually approve of the thing that you're talking about, Tony. Okay. So it's not a problem at the grassroots level. The problem is with the upper echelon of power-hungry, greedy oligarchs that cannot capitulate and release their power.
Boom.
Bernie's not wrong, and I'm not wrong, and you're not wrong. There have been movements decade after decade, year after year, decade after decade, century after century of people saying, this isn't right. We want to get back to basics. We want to stay local. We want to do this. We want to respect our brethren. And yet somehow the system moves forward. And, they always cook up a story and drop the rest of us into the meat grinder.
Yeah, I think, one of the solutions that I had written down is about, our leaders. And I think that's just directly related to who the leadership is. You have a lot of leaders and a lot of people in power that are frankly crazy. They're greedsters. They're crazy. They're nasty. They're fucking CIA agents. They're KGB agents, corporate overlords. And it's hard to rip the power from them. And one of the reasons it's hard is because of propaganda, because of nationalism. And I don't know. It's almost like people, I don't know. Do you believe, Kyle, that the United States is a real democracy?
No, I don't. No, I don't. You know what our problem is? Our problem is that long ago, we became untethered from the ground. I keep on saying it. Life is easy in many ways. You work, you make money, you buy stuff with your money. It's kind of nice. It's almost like a drug. Like you get addicted to this drug. For better or for worse, I would say on a global level, like on a human level, it's worse. Like we're supposed to be spending some time with dirt under our fingernails, rooted to the ground, rooted to the natural cycles, and we have totally gotten away from that.
Right.
And that's part of the problem. Like, I'm glad that I don't have to grow my own food. I'm glad about that. I'm glad that I get to burn some gas. I really like that.
I know, modern convenience, man.
Modern convenience, but that collectively has allowed us to drift away from a really, really grounded, psychologically and physically grounded lifestyle. Absolutely. You know what I mean? Because and it's true, like people suffered immensely when they had to deal with droughts and difficult winters and you couldn't get seeds in. It was a lot of trouble and you had to have 8 fucking kids because 6 of your kids died, and then they would need to bring in the hay. That I'm not saying I want to go back to that. What I'm saying is that we've got completely in the opposite direction and we left all of that behind, and there actually was some good parts about that lifestyle. Not the children dying from dysentery. That's bad. I admit that. But becoming completely untethered and not knowing where your food comes from and not working for your food and not being tethered to natural cycles, that's not good either,
Yeah, and I think it's hard. I know, I completely agree. And I think it's hard for people who are not tethered to see through certain lies and see through certain things that leaders and people in power are telling them. Some people, to maintain this modern convenience and to maintain the illusion that everything is fine, will either are unable or are just okay with accepting the information that is given to them, even though it is not in their best interest and it's keeps the people in power maintaining their power. So I think that there's a level of being grounded where you can then go, wait a second, this isn't right. This is not right. This propaganda is obviously bullshit. And I don't think a lot of people, and so I'm not blaming people. I'm not blaming people who can't see through it. I think that's kind of the world we live in with modern convenience, that it just kind of happens. And so if more people were grounded, maybe we could see through that and elect people who are actually not nasty.
So what's our solution?
Well, we're putting out some broad solutions, but I think on a base level, you can see when there's people that are obviously nationalist moron assholes. And I can see that there are people who are moron rich nationalist assholes. for those of you out there, stop voting for fucking rich moron nationalist assholes. There, solution.
That's a start. I would say that's a start. Yep.
I would like to see technical change, move to renewables and other things that are going to create green jobs and other make different. Our world has so many technical opportunities. I'd like to see a lot of technical advances without conflict. A lot of these technical advances are driven by conflict. We actually talked about this on the last show, that the World War II and these wars push technical advances. I'd like to see technical advances. I'd like to see money and grants and help with no strings attached to push and help technical advances just to help society. Why does it always have to be for something? Why does it have to be for a war? Or why does it have to be for this? Or why does it have to be?
Why can't it be for growing food or disseminating information in a good way?
Right.
Not in a toxic way, but in a good way.
Exactly.
I mean, let's face it. In this pandemic world we're living in right now, everybody's complaining about, remote learning and Zoom call this and my, the infrastructure. My thing isn't fast enough. It's true, and it's not, but it could be, and it should be.
Exactly.
It could and it should be.
That's exactly what I'm talking about.
There's no reason I shouldn't have a shitload more bandwidth than I do right now, so that I can have conversation with you and have other things going on at the same time without suffering because I'm at the end of the line of 20 miles of fucking copper from the 1980s.
That's exactly what I'm talking about. You can have really good bandwidth. You can have a wind turbine and solar panels on your home. You can have all sorts of these sort of technological advances that give us some modern convenience, but don't necessarily create a bunch of wealth for a few individuals. And that's obviously why it's not there, is because it's not creating a bunch of wealth for a few individuals. But that's what I think that's the solution, is
civics and nutrition.
Creating these technological advances with food and with civics and nutrition, not for profit, but just for society,
and not for wartime, and not grown out of a conflict.
Right. So
for the benefit of humankind.
Right, exactly, for the benefit of humankind. So I think that if people say, well, what's the solution? How do I move forward, or how do I get involved with this? I think that's an easy thing. If someone's saying we need to do this because this is going to help just our people and it's going to be better for the United States and blah blah blah, nationalist bullshit, blah blah blah, that's obviously not good. But if someone's like, hey, we just need to get this in here because it's going to help everyone, it's going to help society, that's what we're talking about. So I think that's the difference that we have to figure out when we're just making like basic choices. And we're making basic choices, but it's hard. I'm not beating around the bush. I'm not saying I'm perfect. I make stupid modern convenience choices too. So it's something that we all can improve on, is trying to make choices that advance everyone, advance all of society, advance these technical things without destruction and without nationalist bullshit.
Can we say maybe as a way to move forward that incremental change is better than no change at all?
Yeah, totally. Absolutely.
I mean, that's something that I sort of try and work with in my own life. I mean, I know, dude, I've got a minivan that's not great on gas. I've got a 77 Buick. I'm a burner. I already admitted it.
You have a 77 Buick? Holy fuck, man. Jesus.
Yeah, dude, it's awesome. It's got a red velour interior. It's delicious.
Wow.
Yeah. Anyway, the point I'm making is that pretend I didn't mention the Buick.
Okay.
I have these things, but I also try and make small incremental decisions, that I think are positive. So generally speaking, I try and shop locally. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I have well, it's not as low a carbon footprint as I would like because I do live out here and I have to drive everywhere.
Right.
But it's like, I guess what I'm trying to say is make a conscientious decision to just do something that you think is grounded in a reasonable amount of data driven science, that okay, this is better, this is a better choice than the other choice. You know what I mean? Do you have to do it all the time? Can you never eat a Dorito with red dye again? Of course not, because fucking A, somebody gives me Doritos, I'm like but I don't buy them. You know what I mean? It's not what I do, you know?
I think too that when we talk about advancements, excuse me, advancements without conflict, one giant revolution and super quick change is going to be very detrimental to a lot of people. It's conflict. And I'm not saying that's horrible. Yes, maybe we do need a revolution. But if we do want to move forward without so much conflict, if we do want to move forward without so much death and destruction and craziness, it's got to be small incremental change.
Yes.
It has to be small incremental change, because quick change is conflict.
Exactly.
So
is conflict is revolution.
Right. So this small incremental change, I think it is happening, and people need to jump on board, as opposed to being so like, well, why should I get involved? Why should I deal with this? We just need what big giant change. A big giant change is going to make a war, man. Big giant change. That's what leads to war. So we need to do the small things. And I think that it's totally possible. If there's a lot of small incremental change, eventually the greedsters won't have such a grip on things, and they just, it eventually will change.
I've said it before and I'll say it again. The only power that we really have left is the power of our wallets.
Yeah, right.
Consumer power is the only real power you have left. If the entire country, the United States, excuse me,
Yeah, that's
decided.
Stop it, Kyle. Stop it.
The entire country collectively decided tomorrow to stop supporting Smithfield, the big, ag company that
Done.
has the horrible CAFOs.
Yep.
They're toasted. They have to go to the table. They have to capitulate.
Right.
It's difficult because to mobilize all these people around a common cause is something that is intrinsically proven historically challenging.
Right.
And that's the tricky part, man.
It is the tricky part, but I think it's possible. And
I agree.
I'd like to think it's possible, because I'd like to think that we will move into a better world, that humans are realizing that the cycle of conflict and change is not good anymore. I think we're realizing that that cycle isn't working. And so I think that it's going to happen. I think that the change without war is happening.
I hope you're right, buddy.
So that was as much of a solutions as we could come up with. And it's up to everybody to figure out your own solutions. It's up to everybody to try your best and figure out your own solutions, if that's what you want. If you want to be a nationalist dick and just be like, fuck it, me and America first, well then fuck off and do your thing. But I'm not into that, man. I'm not into that.
Small steps, really.
What's that?
Small steps.
Small steps.
Each person take baby steps.
Baby steps. So post World War II era, let's move through it. Let's get through it. Boom. And I told you last week I wasn't going to forget 80s movies wisdom. We got some 80s movies wisdom for you. So in the 80s, it was crazy Cold War. You had the United States and you had the Soviet Union, and they had this Cold War. Wasn't battlefront war. It was a war of intelligence agencies. It was a war of information. It was a war of propaganda. It was just insane. And
you know what I love about the 80s, Tony? The Cold War.
And it just went through all society, right? The Cold War was just such a big part of society. So one of the yeah, we grew up in the 80s, and so it was just like it was just a giant part of it was a giant part of your life. One of the movies that was about the Cold War, and more than that, was Red Dawn. So they actually made a remake. I never saw the remake. Fuck the remake. I don't care about the remake. The original was some heavy stuff, and it was actually a pretty heavy movie. It was a sad movie. It wasn't like a typical 80s like feel good comedy or anything. It was like a messed up crazy movie. The premise was that in the Cold War, the Russians and some other dudes, I think like Mexico or something, joined up with the Russians, and like they invaded Colorado, and and then there's like a real war, the communists versus the capitalists. And it was a nice piece of American propaganda to show, like, hey, don't let the communists invade because they're gonna mess you up. But it was a cool movie. It was a messed up movie. It's hard to watch, actually. I don't know, Kyle, you should check it out. It's hard to watch.
I need to revisit it for sure.
So there was a character, actually, Patrick Swayze in his younger years. I think
rest his soul.
What's that?
God rest his soul.
God rest his soul. Yeah, Patrick Swayze.
Like Patrick was a good man.
He was, yeah, good actor, good dude.
Good dude.
And he played a guy named Jed, I believe, in the movie. And so he's out in the wilderness fighting the Russians and guerrilla style. And he says they're out. I think they're out like sniping some dudes, or like they're out like hunting or something. And he says, I quote, "It's kind of strange, isn't it? How the mountains pay us no attention. You laugh or you cry, and the wind just keeps on blowing." And that's it. That's the 80s movies wisdom. Cold War, real war, whatever messed up stuff's going on in your life, man.
Just keep burning gas.
The wind just keeps on blowing.
Fucking factory food. It doesn't matter. No. Sorry. Sorry. It just completely undermined everything.
This is the dichotomy of life. This is the yin and yang. This is the way of the universe. I like to be weird with the universe, and the universe is what it is, and it doesn't care. And the universe is crazy and insane, and it doesn't care about right and wrong. It just keeps on moving. So we do what we can do. I don't know about judgment. I'm not going to pass any judgment. I try and pass less judgment on people.
So in the theme of our show, though, you know what I'm going to say here? I'm going to say that's all 100% true. It obviously is. That's very profound 80s movies wisdom. So, but in the theme of our show, it's up to us whether or not we want the wind to keep on blowing in a place that we've made better somehow, or that we've made worse. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So maybe that's a good takeaway for us. It's just like, and again, I'm not saying you have to be a saint. You don't have to just completely rewire your whole life and pull off the grid and not use energy. I mean, it's barely even realistic to do it. Nobody can do that. But like we were saying, and like we had said earlier in the show, even incremental attempts, even small steps, when you have millions of people making small steps, all of a sudden you're talking about big steps now. You know what I mean? So, brainstorm it for yourself. Figure out a way to maybe do one thing different than you're doing, tomorrow than you're doing today. Let it go from there.
I'm going
Great rivers start as a trickle.
You got it. I'm gonna leave it at that. I'm gonna leave it with Kyle's words there because I agree with him. I think he hit it right on the head. Let's do it. And thank you for joining us. We appreciate everybody. This is the Holographic Podcast, signing off.